Have you ever been there? You know those seasons when your spiritual life just feels empty? When it feels like you're stuck in the shadows and you're just wondering, God, where are you? Well, you are not alone. The writer of Psalm 143, King David, he knew that feeling inside and out.
This psalm, it paints such a vivid picture of that feeling. It wasn't written from a throne, you know? It was written from a place of desperation, maybe even a cave. It's the raw, honest feeling of being totally crushed, overwhelmed, and spiritually dry. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful and so relatable, even thousands of years later.
But here's the really amazing part. This psalm isn't just a cry of despair. Tucked away inside this ancient lament is a surprisingly clear, structured roadmap. It's basically a 5-step guide that shows us how to walk through the darkest valleys and turn our weakness into worship. So let's walk through this journey together.
Okay, so here's the path we're going to trace. It starts with submission, then moves right through the fire of suffering. After that, there's a huge turning point, seeking. This leads to a really heartfelt supplication, and it all ends with the transformation of sanctification. This is the journey from the shadows right into the heart of God.
So, where does a journey like this even begin? Well, it's probably not where you'd expect. It doesn't start with demands or complaints or trying to bargain with God. It starts with this radical act of humble submission. David just throws himself completely on God's mercy.
Just look at what he's pleading here. He doesn't say, hey, look at how good I've been. No, he does the complete opposite. He says, God, if you judge me based on my own merit, I'm toast. Instead, his entire appeal is based on God's character, his faithfulness, and his righteousness. He's basically saying, Lord, I've got nothing to stand on but your grace.
And this brings us to a really crucial Hebrew word, tzedakah, which means righteousness. What's so fascinating is that David isn't afraid of God's righteousness. He actually sees it as his only hope. See, in this context, it's not about God's punishing justice. It's about his faithfulness to his promises, his saving character. For David, God's righteousness is a safe place, not something to fear. So this first step teaches us something really profound. The way out of the valley begins on our knees. It's all about shifting our focus from our own resume to God's unwavering character. Because at the end of the day, God isn't listening for perfect prayers. He's listening for honest, penitent ones.
All right, so building on that foundation of submission, the psalm moves into a raw, unfiltered acknowledgement of suffering. This isn't about putting on a brave face or pretending everything's okay. No, this is about being brutally honest with God about just how dark things are.
I mean, this language is just visceral, isn't it? Crushed to the ground, dwelling in dark places. David feels like he's been buried alive. And this tells us something so important. Even a man the Bible describes as being after God's own heart felt complete and utter despair.
Now, to really grasp how deep this feeling is, we have to look at the original Hebrew. The word for overwhelmed here is ataf. It doesn't just mean sad, it literally means to faint, to be wrapped up in darkness, to feel like you're suffocating. It's like his whole inner world is just collapsing under the weight of it all. This is the real language of lament.
So what's the big takeaway from all this raw honesty? It's that being overwhelmed is not the same thing as being faithless. Actually, it seems that sometimes God allows these dark valleys to purify our faith, to teach us a kind of dependence we couldn't learn any other way. Sometimes faith grows its strongest roots in the darkest soil. Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. If you're feeling crushed, overwhelmed, literally suffocating in darkness, how on earth does faith survive that? Where's the turning point that keeps you from going under completely?
And right here, the psalm gives us the answer in step 3, intentional seeking. This is the pivot. This is the moment where there's a conscious, deliberate choice to shift your focus from the pain you feel inside to the God who is above.
And how does he do it? Notice the action verbs. I remember, I meditate, I muse. He is deliberately choosing to change his focus. He's moving from his current suffering to God's past faithfulness. And the result is incredible. His soul starts to long for God again, like a desert longs for rain. That desire is reawakened. Now, this isn't just taking a passive trip down memory lane. At the heart of this verse is the Hebrew verb zakar, to remember. And in this context, it's a powerful act. It's a willful, deliberate spiritual discipline of recalling what God has done in order to re-anchor faith and rekindle trust. He is literally preaching truth to his own soul to retrain his emotions.
So the takeaway here is huge. Memory is medicine for the soul. When despair hits, the discipline is to remember and rehearse God's faithfulness. And what this does is it purifies our desires. We start to move from just wanting relief from our situation to wanting a relationship with God Himself.
This reawakened desire now fuels the next step, which is urgent supplication. That longing for God gets channeled into a powerful, honest, and direct prayer.
You can just feel the intensity here, can't you? Answer me quickly, my spirit fails. This isn't impatience, it's desperation that's actually born out of faith. And right in the middle of that desperation, there's this profound flicker of hope. Let me hear your loving kindness in the morning. He's sitting in the dark, but he's expecting the dawn.
And that word, loving-kindness, is the absolutely glorious Hebrew term chesed. It's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's God's loyal, unbreakable, covenant-keeping mercy. It's the specific quality of God's character that David is banking on to meet him when the sun comes up. And right here, we see his prayer mature right before our eyes. David's plea shifts from, "God, get me out of this," to, "God, teach me the way I should walk." Suddenly, the greatest fear isn't suffering anymore. It's the feeling of God's absence. His prayer becomes less about escape and so much more about obedience.
And that brings us to the final, culminating step of this whole journey, hopeful sanctification. The psalmist doesn't end in fear or even just in relief. It ends in a prayer for total transformation.
This is the destination. The entire focus has now shifted to God's will, God's Spirit, and God's glory. The prayer is no longer about David's comfort, but about him being conformed to God's character. And what's the motivation? For the sake of your name. It's all about God's reputation, not his own relief. And here, you can see the whole journey laid out. It's this beautiful rhythm of grace. As we trace the progression, we see a pattern. The servant bows, and God grants mercy. The servant suffers, and God teaches dependence. The servant seeks, prays, and obeys, and in response, God rekindles, renews, and revives. It's just a stunning picture of a real relationship.
And so the psalm ends here, not with a big shout of victory, but with a quiet, confident declaration of his identity and his purpose. The man who felt crushed at the beginning is now the Spirit-led servant. He has walked through the valley, and grace has done its work, leaving him on level ground, ready to follow. The journey from despair to devotion is finally complete.